Excellent. If you bring all the text up, that'd be perfect. So as you can see, we believe that heritage in terms of a digital format fits very much within the context of information management. And generally we see 4 steps to the process. And number 1, from a conservation point of view, is actually understanding the key objectives, the real purpose as to why you'd want your digital information. So for us, number 1 is actually understanding the conservation activity. Number 2, in terms of step 2, is actually understanding what information or digital documentation already exists, where it's located, and thinking about, if you like, information provenance as well, thinking about its reliability, and actually thinking from a commercial point of view, is it something that can be made available? Does it have any security or sensitivity around about it as well? We then move into terms of what we call step 3, which is a recording activity, and look at additional research and investigation, which might help us to understand our asset a bit better, and how that should be recording should be integrated within that conservation process to ensure effectiveness of information as well. We're also thinking as well in terms of future references prosperity as well, what's going to be needed for the longer term, and thinking also about data refreshing as well as we move into the next 10, 15 and 20 years. Step 4 for us is what we call our sweet spot. It's thinking very much in terms of that information management and a cultural heritage, and thinking about the creation of a common data environment as well. So thinking about that dialogue and how we can share the digital information across all of the stakeholders in that heritage project. And you can see on the left hand side some of the benefits we believe from better information management in a digital world from a conservation and heritage point of view. Angela, I don't know if you can bring them all up. There we go. But the first thing for us is more reliable data for actually monitoring changes within that asset. We're seeing much better prevention in terms of conservation management. And I think one of the big things in a more digital and virtualized scenario is starting to think about prioritization, in fact to think more and more about scenario-based program planning as well. And I think one of the big things, if we get this right, we're seeing faster retrieval of the right information by all those involved in the project. But basically, about the different actors being able to access their information in real time. Well, what does that mean? It means we're seeing less work and less duplication as well within the whole process as well. So for us, information management is key to the whole heritage process, and we think that's a really key foundation to get in place as well. If we move across to the next slide, one of the things we think is key on all projects, be it heritage or be it new build, is to actually understand information requirements and that flow of information. So first off, we think about demand for information, working down from a corporate, what we call organizational level, and giving clear definition of what data is needed to support the management asset of your conservation portfolio, and to make sure that you can run your asset effectively as well. We move down to thinking about the asset information requirements and how we're going to manage that asset effectively during the operational life cycle. And we also think about what we call in the UK our employer's information requirement, and trying to make sure in terms of any capital expenditure or any work in terms of restoration type work, we can start to supply data transactions up the pyramid as well. So we're thinking about very much the demand for information coming down the way from organizational or corporate to managing your asset or portfolio to managing an individual asset, and at the same time we're thinking about how information can be pulled up through the supply chain as well. So we've got 3 key aspects within there, and that's clear definition of what data and information is required to support the heritage process, having common data and information standards to make sure that the supply chain is all working to the same data schema, and making sure there's a supporting data transaction process in place. So we're thinking about, from that heritage process, both supply and demand for information, about becoming good at buying and using that data. If we move on again, Angela. So we start to imagine that digital built estate. So we're starting to think, and this is where we're starting to introduce building information modelling. We're starting to think about gradually building up what we call project information models. So you can see on the left-hand side, individual projects that might be being laser scanned or captured, brought into a model environment, and pulled together into what we call in the middle, a portfolio level, our asset information management strategy. So a digitized asset information management strategy. By doing this, what it's starting to do by having a master data schema is we can start to think about, from a client perspective, that whole digital asset management strategy. So start to think more and more about managing your data and the heritage process in a state level and how we can start to digitize it. So we're thinking more and more about that whole asset lifecycle modeling and how we can think more and more about in use and optimization of the asset as well. Moving on again, Angela. You can see the wedge. This is becoming quite popular in the UK. Within the UK, we have a Bhimm for Heritage group, and these are some of the key constructs that we can see. Along the x-axis, we have our time component, and along the y, we have our information, our building information. The bottom layer, it is very much in terms of, if you like, our foundation, our common data environment that has within there our information, especially condition surveys within there for the asset as well. It has our building program and functional requirements within there. The layer above, we have corresponding, our reference models and the point clouds. So we're starting to think about relational databases. We're thinking how they tie together to design models, both in the context of BIM and CAD. And we're also thinking more and more about specification on basis of design data as well. And ultimately, we're starting to thinking more and more about our facilities management data, but we're thinking more and more from a conservation point of view about gathering information, being able to analyze it, and ultimately being able to make well-informed decisions that support the asset management strategy. But key to it is having a common data environment and having condition surveys. And we're thinking more and more about remote condition surveys as well. Next slide, please, Angela. But at the heart of this is better information management. And what we're seeing, especially in terms of heritage projects, is the image in the bottom left. We don't have a well-managed file store. All information is maybe there, but it can't be retrieved. It's not properly indexed. So one of the key things in the UK is thinking more and more about having good indexation, good classification, and be able to report upon it as well. So start to think about how we can actually be able to enforce file naming of our data as well. Just being able to find our information quickly and rapidly is becoming key. Making sure that we can access all our information to make more well-informed decisions during that operational life cycle. So better information management is essentially key. Moving on again, one. You can see there, so we're getting that foundation right. We're thinking within a project context about assurance in terms of being able to index files and data delivery. So we're starting to see much more focus, if you like, in terms of information delivery plans, especially for any conservation type work or activity. We're also seeing it focus within an operational context as well, where we're thinking about linking it to geospatial portfolios and actually being able to give the BIM model view as well. So we're thinking more and more about the model being able to give us a visual query and the data access. We're also thinking more and more about the context of information assurance and making sure when information is in a published state, it's got provenance, i.e. you've got information that's got a high degree of accuracy and it can be relied upon as well. So we're thinking more and more about a whole life and client shared approach. And this is what's been used by the Environment Agency within the UK, and thinking more and more about that concept of that asset information model and how it can be maintained in that longer term. And if we can click on once more, Angela. So I think the first question is, the purpose of BIM within that historic environment. There's been a lot of work done in the UK. We mentioned our Bhimm for Heritage and Conservation working groups. But what we're seeing is Bhimm is actually helping support the activities and again help the understanding of the historic built environment. It's given us that digital representation of historic structures, which are hugely important. As they come to needing more end of life or adaptation, we're finding more having that digital representation that's highly accurate is allowing them to better maintain it better. We're being able to support the decision-making process as well, looking at the scenario plans and assisting in terms of analysis. It might be in terms of archaeological works or structural analysis, but it's also helping us to make sure that historic buildings actually perform better as well, and be able to support the management. I think this is a big part for us as well of heritage information. It's becoming a more accurate repository for the public to understand as well, and it's improving communication. We're seeing much more, if you like, of that digital heritage projects as well. It's also demonstrating safe methods of work. You can see on the right hand side, which is our fourth rail bridge within the UK, which hopefully many of you recognise. It's a key building in Scotland. How do we safely manage and adapt and inspect that project? Bhimm becomes a safe way for us to do that. We can trial it in a digital environment before. So we're finding Bhimm is helping support conservation. It's helping us in terms of repair and maintenance activities. And the big thing, I think, more and more is becoming a key aid for us in terms of capturing knowledge, especially in terms of historic techniques as well. So it's becoming a key repository for all this digital information. So some of the big questions we're seeing in Bhimm for the historic environment are actually, and this needs to be seen in the context of both buildings and infrastructure. How do we more rapidly capture existing data and bring it into a Bhimm environment? How do we assess its pathology in terms of what's there, assessing its condition? And how do we start to link geospatial data, asset information model and Bhimm together? And ultimately the big goal as well is to start to think about optimization. When we bring all these data sets together, how do we think about improving that asset lifecycle and achieving better performance? We're seeing software vendors now such as Bentley start to think about that asset performance model much more, fusing together information technology along with operation technology, especially in embedded sensors. It might be in terms of moisture content or such like, along with modern Bhimm tools such as engineering technology and digital engineering models. You can see from the slide already in the UK we've had several projects from a historic point of view. Manchester Town Hall complex, we could understand adaptation much more easily. We could make sure that there was better procurement of the heritage activities. We could understand from a safety point of view and from a public safety point of view what was required as well. If you click on again, Angela, you can see there that actually one of the big things that we were able to do as we started to build that information model was to create user-friendly interfaces, especially from an FM perspective, to better maintain that asset as it went on. If you click on again, you'll see that we actually monitored the benefits of it there. Clicking on once more, Angela, you can see there in terms of some of the studies, just being able to do something as simple as a ventilation motor replacement, by being able to better access the information and understand what was required in terms of the task, you can start to understand some of the benefits that we can see in terms of better historically managing the facilities management process. So real savings start to happen within the FM perspective of there. So start to think about, be able to think about better heritage, but better facilities management within there as well, giving us information that's going to make sure we can optimize the facilities management process. So real savings to be had. Clicking on once again. Up in Scotland, we've got some key pilot projects there. Hopefully many of you recognise Edinburgh Castle. It's been laser scanned, and we're starting to think about more and more how do you link the building information model to the asset information model and the supporting life cycle activities. So we're thinking more and more about relational databases. We're also thinking more about tacit knowledge as well. We have teams working on these projects that have got many years of experience that might be coming to retire. How do we capture these historic tools? So we're starting to think about more embedding video content and start to capture tacit knowledge as to how people actually undertake the key things there. And you can start to see some of the things we're coming in as well now. It might be in terms of 3D moisture mapping, but we're thinking more and more about bringing other data sets within there as well. So Historic Environment Scotland, starting to think about pulling together all these different data sets within there, such as microwave moisture data, starting to bring them all together to make more effective decision making in the future of our key historic assets. Clicking on it, sorry, I got it there. One of the key projects within the UK at the moment, and I'm sure you may have seen about it in Italy as well, is the Palace of Westminster, our Parliament building. At this point in time, we're looking at the future of it, and there's maybe a multi-million-pound refurbishment coming up. There's many different options within there. But a programme of that scale, in terms of capital cost and complexity, requires multiple designers and multiple stakeholders to make key decisions and start to think about how we can coordinate it as well. And Bhimm is it's very much at the heart, if you like, of this in terms of providing that framework for making well-informed decisions about the future adaptation of our key building. It's a huge programme, and Bhimm right at the heart of it. Right at the heart of it as well is the whole information sharing process of the common data environment. And you can see there from, if you like, the proposals for their building information at the heart of it. Bringing together, and if you like, start to think about how Bhimm links together many different data sources and types, from historical records, survey drawings, registers of hazardous materials, from photos to condition surveys. Bhimm is starting to become that conduit for being able to pull together all this information within a central repository or a common data environment. So the information sharing process that Bhimm offers is essentially very much key to it and start to help us shape, if you like, the process of the decision making as well. You can also see there that key to it as well has been in terms of asset capture. There's now a 5-year framework to provide surveying, or if you like, in terms of more measure survey works within there as well. I think arguably it'll be the biggest laser scanning project in the whole world as part of this renewal programme as well, helping facilitate better understanding and helping, if you like, better planning in terms of the future management of the palace as well. So we're starting to see all these key things coming together for data management and data capture. We mentioned already in terms of laser scanning, but we're starting to see much more different ways coming as well, especially in terms of photographical surveying, stereo and opto rectified cameras as well, supporting the FM system as well, becoming key to that process. At the same time, we're starting to think about the digital archive as well. It might be a case that the palace has to be shut down for some repairs. It's as much a museum as anything, so when we think about data capture, we're thinking not about just for the capital works, but how do we start to make sure there's a digital archive in place as well? And we've already seen people such as the Smithsonian Institute starting to think about bringing, if you like, this concept of that digital archive together. So bringing, if you like, very much that 3D exploration tool for the public to be able to look in real time at some of the artifacts and be able to navigate their way around, if you like, the digital museum as well. So starting to think more and more about prevention of loss of critical data. You know, it might be in terms of shutting things down, but thinking more and more not just about the building, but thinking more and more about the collection and the context as well as there. So starting to think about bringing, if you like, it very much online. So the creation of a digital archive. We're seeing much more as well, and creating, if you like, of portals, starting to link together geospatial with as well. So it comes a nice easy way, if you click on again, Angela, we can start to, in terms of these nice easy portals for the facilities management teams to be able to link together all these data sets as well. So more and more the creation of simple dashboards to be able to find both, the, if you like, our assets within there and indeed better maintainability within there as well. So we're thinking more and more about some of the workflows around about heritage as well. We're thinking about data capture, such as 3D laser scanning, and this is becoming very much business as usual. We're seeing clients now with the confidence to actually undertake laser scanning themselves. We're seeing much more deliverables coming as point clouds as well. And then what do we do with them? We're thinking more and more about data processing, bringing them into that model information environment. We're also seeing a shift as well towards context capture and photogrammetry as well, making it relatively easy to bring it into that model-based environment. And I think for us, we created a guide within the UK looking at the benefits of laser scanning for clients. Being able to capture existing conditions rapidly with high resolution, being able to identify errors in terms of as-built, and for us this is helping reduce the client risk within the renovation projects as well. Being able to do it faster and actually reducing the amount of physical time to be on the sites as well. And at the same time, more and more, we're starting to create benchmarks for assess the structural integrity of our assets as well. And of course the big benefit is actually being able to record these cultural and historic facilities as well, that digital representation of our assets. We're seeing this globally as well, this move, if you like, towards the digitized estate. What we call the move from the project information model to the asset information model to the asset management strategy. And I'm sure many of you will recognise the Sydney Opera House, obviously a key iconic building. And one of the things the client's looking to do just now is to create a Bhimm interface that's web enabled that will start to link together all this information, all these different data sets that they've got. So we create a digital geospatial accurate model of the building, but start to link together all its major engineering documentation and data sets, and indeed all the building management and control systems. So Bhimm becoming the primary interface solution to start to make more at that one-stop point of all for the building information requirements. AECOM are currently working just now as part of a team along with likes of Ecodomus, and stage 1 looks at what we call the retrieval of information. On the left hand side you can see there in terms of the Sydney Opera House model, we've got proprietary models within there that we're linking together through Ecodomus as a data aggregator to start to bring together all the different systems within there and start to think about how we manage information and start to think about better how we manage the document management within there, all if you like within very much within that central aggregated database. So we're thinking more and more about that retrieval of information through central databases, and key to this has been the use of COBie. So start to think about how we can use agnostic data exchanges to be able to bring together different information. If you move up what you got there, you were also thinking more and more about visual analytics as well. So you imagine that an asset such as the Opera House produces a considerable amount of data within the systems that are awfully quite hard to visualize. So a big part of what's being done is visual analytics, and you can see some of the key things that we'll do. Looking at condition surveys, work orders, asset condition, asset age, and we're also pulling together information, if you like, from the building management systems as well, and allowing it to be used very much to be viewed in a visual platform. And the next stage there is starting to link together live data. So we're thinking more and more about live data as well as historic data logs as well. And key to all this is actually understanding the asset management strategy as well, the sources and data views. So we've got static assets, such maybe a museum. How does that link together with remote condition monitoring, with building management systems and sensors? And ultimately, how do we start to think about data on building users, maybe in terms of the museum occupancy level? But by understanding all of that, it's going to help us to define the asset information requirements and the dashboard views of the data as well. We're also seeing a shift to thinking more and more about beacon technology. As well as the Internet of Things, we're also thinking about location of things within our assets as well, and tying this together with pre- and post-occupancy evaluation. So we're constantly monitoring our asset in terms of performance to make sure we're getting what we call real-time hard landings to understand and optimize the asset. But to do that, we've got to understand the information sources and the data views right at the beginning as we set this up. We're also moving more and more to that world of cognitive asset management, and I'm sure many of you saw the work that the likes of IBM is doing. Angelo, if you can continually click through these, we're starting to be able to understand more and more in terms of, if you like, operational data, in terms of how is the space being used. We're thinking about how people use our assets more and more. So we're starting to think about more sensor-rich assets. We're starting to think about telemetry, and we're starting to think more and more about the use of artificial intelligence and machine-based reading to be able to understand all these huge amounts of data that's coming in. So we're starting to think about the Internet of Things within historic buildings and how the use of cognitive computing can help us to mine through huge amounts of data and to give us some real insight in terms of how our data is performing as well. We're thinking more and more about space optimization. So bringing together, if you like, our location of things along with analytics, advanced analytics, to get the movement of people within our assets as well, and be able to redesign, and it might be in terms of how we operate in terms of optimal traffic patterns within our assets as well. And we're seeing more and more being able to take all this data, excuse me, all the sensory data, and create what we call natural language interface as well. So we're thinking more and more about predictive analytics through a process of cognitive asset management. So it's become very much a key aspect of what we're doing as well. So we're seeing the likes of IBM be able to think about inter-building communication as well. So thinking not just about an individual asset, but sharing data across portfolios as well. So we start to learn across a whole digital ecosystem. So we're moving more and more towards cognitive automation of data science. So we're seeing more, especially from a heritage point of view, thinking more about analytics and simulation. So advanced analytics, where we're learning from the past. What does the past tell me about the asset? How do we start to think about improved performance within there and reducing risk within there as well? So we're seeing cognitive automation of data science becoming a key aspect of the heritage process. We're thinking more and more about predictive analytics and starting to think about how we can start to show when it's time to act. Thinking about being able to look at anomalies before failure happens. So it's becoming a key aspect of the modern, if you like, heritage project that are sensor rich, that are using analytics to think about predictive outcomes. It's a huge amount of data to think about as well. And on the next slide, you can start to see the amount of data, the data points that are actually coming in from something as simple as a motor as well. But we're in a real challenge. How do we manage all this data within our heritage projects, and how do we start to make some real data insight within it as well? So apologies if my voice is lacking a bit, but I think it's showing you some of the key concepts that's happening in the UK. We mentioned we have working groups such as Bhimm for Heritage and Conservation that are working hard to move these key themes through a digital era as well. So thank you for listening, and thank you for putting up with my